great to be here. Thanks to Henry Stewart, Kevin, everybody for keeping us moving along here. I'm going to be talking today about collaboration, which is a very big topic, but I'm going to be breaking it down in a few different buckets and into a framework that I have found to be helpful in thinking about ways that we can all own collaboration, no matter what our role is in a given organization or on a project. And I'm going to end with literally a checklist of just some ideas, just some thought starters of things that you could actually start doing, as it says in the title, now or in the next couple of days, to try and just, have some ownership and think about collaboration in a little bit of a different way, but in a sort of easy to digest way. Definition of collaboration, I'm sure most of us are familiar. I see it actually all over the agenda for today. I'm noticing it come up a lot. So it's something that we all think about all the time, I'm sure. But the act of working with someone to produce or create something, this is literally what we all do, no matter what role you're in within the organization, that is what you do. And then secondarily, traitorous cooperation with an enemy, which might be sometimes how it feels, but we're hoping it's not. That is, the goal is to make it not feel like cooperation with an enemy. So moving on here, just a quick snapshot about me. I have had I say in quotes, career in quotes, creative operation, pretty much my whole adult life. I include a few things on here from even when I was little, of me being about 8 or 9 years old, playing work, fun with my landline and my notepad, like one of those leather pads. I don't know if anyone remembers those, that, you don't mark up your desk. And then on through to many experiences that I've had through various schooling. I have a background in radio. This is essentially a visual representation of my LinkedIn page. So feel free to go there if you want more detail. But essentially, the main takeaway here is that I've done a ton of work in radio, television, podcast, marketing, distribution, promotions, it runs the gamut of the creative life cycle in a variety of different media. And it always has felt like creative operations, what I've done and what my role has been, even though the title of creative operations and sort of the industry of it maybe has only had that name in my life anyways for the last 5 years. So I find it to be interesting to kind of reflect on what we mean by creative operations. And I do think it shows up in a lot of different ways. And then I include my babysitter, my nod to babysitting here, because that was how I made money all throughout my teens and into my 20s before my jobs started making money. And I think some of my most valuable lessons in terms of working with big personalities, whether it's celebrities or executives or creatives or whatever it might be, many lessons have come just from babysitting and learning how to take care of people on a very basic level of, are people hungry? Are they tired? Do they need some attention? What might it be? So it's been a long road, including having a daughter along the way, who I would say is the highlight of it all. Creative ops, how I think about creative ops before we dive into the collaboration piece, I really think about it as the how. And again, this is about a lot of different things that could fall into creative ops, production management, project management, whatever, but tools, all of the things. This is actually something that I was thinking about how I want to articulate it. And I realized that I have it written again on my LinkedIn page. So this is literally just a quote from that page, but that I believe how we collaborate is important as what we make, and that we experience the best and most fun collaborations when we communicate clearly. Sorry, I have to move some of these screens around. Openly and listen to each other, balance rules with agility, and stay grounded under pressure, especially amidst inevitable change. And I've always also thought of creative ops as really, enabling creatives to do their best work, taking care of the logistics and some of the communication and various things that can be a real distraction for the people who are actually trying to make something. So thinking about the how and thinking about how important that is, that's really always the jumping off point for collaboration for me and creative ops more broadly. So I like to think about this in a sort of hard skills and soft skills way, and hard skills meaning more structural, not like hard, difficult. But I think about, the hard skills, which I imagine as kind of the buildings, the structures that we're in. This is oftentimes, we're talking about the tools, whether it's project management tools, comms tools, media asset management systems, dams, workflows, intake, forecasting, DACs, RACs, all these things that are absolutely integral to healthy creative operations, to collaboration, project management. This is critical. All these things are incredibly important. They are the foundation and the structure that we all work within. We spend a lot of time and money on these things. Specific roles are responsible for these things. We kind of hopefully know our place within this. There's other things that fall into this too. It's like the decisions around, are we working with agencies in-house? Are we hybrid? Are we working in an office? Are we working remote? Are we working hybrid there too? Like, so much goes into sort of the structure, and we spend a lot of time thinking about the structure, and we should always think about the structure. But today I want to focus a little bit more on what I think of as the soft skills, which are the people that are in these buildings. You can have a wonderful building. It can be structurally sound. It can be beautiful. It can be inviting. It can be all these things. But if the people inside of the building are not treating each other well or treating themselves well, then what's really the point of all the rest? So this is the space that I've been really thinking a lot about for forever, but I put this talk together to really focus on the soft skills, because I think that we end up relying a lot on the hard skills and looking at the hard skills, and whether it's people accepting process or resisting process or in charge of process or what it is, there's a lot else that goes along with making these collaborations work. So when I think about the soft skills and the people within the buildings, think about things like reliability, clarity, kindness, transparency, openness, empathy, adaptability, resolves conflict, listens, connects, stays grounded under pressure. We know there's endless amounts of pressure in the work that we do, has a culture add over culture fit mentality in terms of building teams and inclusivity. This is something that I believe everyone is responsible for. It doesn't matter what your role is. This is something that absolutely everybody has a stake in and should be looking at, not waiting for someone else to do it first, not waiting for the perfect project management tool to come around. So how can we all start thinking along these lines of these hard and soft skills and our ability to be effective within both, but truly here? And then again, they can't work without each other. So I think a lot of what I think about here, and this tells you something about my brain, which send help if you will, but I literally woke up like one morning at 4 a.m. and this was a while ago, and I had this formula like pop into my mind because I was working on this presentation for something else and I've readapted it for this, but I was like, okay, if this was I had this vision of like hard skills plus soft skills plus times a purpose. We have to have a purpose. We can all be really great and we can have this high emotional intelligence and this great collaborative skills. We can have all the best tools, but if there's not a purpose, if we don't know why we're doing it, it doesn't really all matter anyways. It's all going to fall flat, but it feels like this combination is what's going to get us to positive collaboration, which ultimately is, I hope, what we all care about. So I did a survey in my most recent job. I got a response of about 70, 80 people responded. This was the broader marketing and creative teams spanning a bunch of different portions of marketing and creative. It was a lot of people that responded. And I asked people very simply, rate your at work collaborations on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, this is the most miserable, horrible thing in the world. I hate it every day. 10 being, this is wonderful. I love everyone. Keep me going. And then I asked people to list a few words off the top of their head that they associate with positive collaborations, and then a few words that they associate with challenging collaborations. And the results, well, not surprising, were fascinating. I'll start with what the actual results were, which was about a 6 out of 10. It came in at about a 6.2 out of 10. However, what was really interesting for me in analyzing this, because these were teams I was literally working with and wanted to use this in a productive way, is that the range was 1 to 10. There were people that were having the experience of a 1, of horrible, and there were people that were having the experience of a 10. Most people were falling in that 6 or 7 zone. So I immediately then remembered I had been in this roundtable discussion that was put on by Aquin, who's a sponsor of this wonderful conference. And I was part of a discussion where they had brought in somebody to talk about burnout and to talk about, or actually real quick, let me show you real quick before I'm jumping ahead of myself. These were some of the words that came up, right? So it's like we had the scale of 1 to 10. But then I had, and feel free to put in the chat if there's other words that come up for you, this was positive collaborations. This was what people felt when they thought of the best projects and the best sort of groups and getting things done. Word clouds, as you probably all know how they work, is the bigger words were the words that came up the most, on down to the smaller words. The biggest word is fun. It can feel fun. Even if it's work, no matter what, and even if you're super busy and you've got all this stuff going on, if the collaboration is going well, it's fun. It's encouraging. There's role clarity. You see empathy popping out, teamwork, open, uplifting, community, sharing, excitement. These are all very positive words. And I think we can all agree that we can think of times where this is what we associate with positive collaborations. On the other hand, these are the words that came up with negative associations with collaboration, and frustration and frustrating were the two biggest words, and they are the same word. So basically you can just imagine frustrating as ginormous here. It's frustrating to be in a challenging collaboration. You see other words pop out here as well. There's too many cooks, inefficient, time, communication, finger pointing, unproductive, combative, undefined roles. Again, there are many, many things that can help in terms of the harder skills, the structural, the building skills that can help with inefficiency and with undefined roles and all these things. Of course, there are things that we can do, but I, again, today want to focus a little bit on the soft skills, but I'm sure some of these words are things that came to mind for you all too, if I were doing an ad hoc survey. And like I said before, where I was jumping ahead of myself, this all reminded me of a roundtable that I had been in where there was this discussion that was being led by Inspire Corps, which I encourage you all to seek out and look up and find on social media. It's a really great organization who had a wonderful presentation on burnout. And what I found to be fascinating as I was going through and doing this survey is that all of a sudden these words were reminding me of this one slide in this presentation that you see. Frustrated is right next to burnout. Whereas joyful and passionate, which you can sort of also associate with fun, that we had in the positive, is on the far other end of burnout. And I think what's really important to keep in mind is that it's not always how much work somebody has. It's how the work is getting done, and how the work feels really impacts how much someone can take on. If you have, I mean, it's amazing to me to think, how when I'm working on things that I'm really passionate about, that I'm really excited about, and have a good collaboration going on, I can take on so much and it doesn't feel like work, versus where I could have just a couple things going on that are just mired in kind of what feels like dysfunction. And then it's all of a sudden burnout land. So I loved this visual, and I loved sort of connecting it back to the words that I was seeing come up in the survey. Next slide here is, sorry, my jumping ahead a little bit. The number one theme that came up in the survey as well that I thought was really interesting, and I wonder if others can relate to as well, is there was a fourth openness, like anything else you want to add about collaboration. And something that came up more than absolutely anything else, and I've heard this over and over and over again, is things like, I love my team, but partner X team is really difficult. Or I love the people I work with, but when we work with so-and-so, it's really hard. And there was all of this. And on the one hand, I was like, this is great. People love their teams. Like there's something good happening within the team building, within the actual teams. But there was a very consistent pattern with finger pointing towards other teams. And just imagine, like, if you're pointing the finger to another team and saying they're difficult, someone's pointing the finger right back at you, like 100% guaranteed. This survey was not the first time this had come up. I had heard this many, many times in peer reviews and one-on-ones and skip levels and all the various things. But I think it's really important to call out that there's a little bit of a clickiness happening in the way that we're set up and the way that we work together. Can sometimes, it seems as though that can sometimes inspire clickiness, which is not what we want. It's the opposite of inclusive, and it creates silos and barriers. So I thought that was interesting to point out as well, that just naturally kept coming up, that it's like, I love my team, but so-and-so's team is the problem. And it's like, okay, if everyone's saying that about each other, then there's obviously no sort of right way there. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the part that's really, truly what we can all do, like setting the stage here of all these different ways to think about collaboration. But I would love for people to walk away with a sense of things you can literally do now to improve, no matter what it is, the role that you're in. So here is a checklist because I love checklists. Who doesn't love a checklist, especially if you're like a creative operations, design operations, photo ops? Probably we all like checklists. But what I would encourage everybody to do here is pick 3 things off of this list that you don't already do, that stand out to you, that resonate in a way that feels doable. I tried to pick things that feel doable. The themes here, when I looked at everything all together, are really around connect, reflect, recharge. And I think that if we can all focus on this to a certain degree, that you might find that you show up a little bit differently. Things in general, you might inspire others, you might just feel better yourself. But again, in collaboration with all of the other things that we do for collaboration, I think this can help. So to get into a few of the details here, I know word walls aren't the best, but I did just want to go with the checklist thing. Attend or sign up for a conference. Everyone gets to check that off right off the bat because you are here. And I truly believe that coming to things, getting outside of your daily routine, connecting with people in the industry, realizing that you're not alone in the various struggles or wins or whatever it may be, share learning, talk to each other, meet people, contextualize your work. I highly recommend too, re-listening, I was just before this, 2 sessions before, enjoy Langley's emotional resilience session. There are so many amazing nuggets in there that really relate to the soft skills of collaboration. So I highly encourage everyone to, if you weren't in it, rewatch that one. I think she's also doing something at the very end of today. But the emotional resilience, there was a quote in there where she said, you know, am I being chased by a lion or just a deadline? It's like, let's keep it in perspective. Connect with someone in a similar role on another team. This is something that I wish I had been better at previous points in my career. I think that the way that our organizations are set up sometimes feels like, hey, wait, there's someone doing my job on another team. And it feels sort of competitive, and it feels a little bit like, you know, there's some flexing that goes on. I would encourage people, if you have that, because no one's probably living in the perfectly organized org structure. If you have people on other teams who feel like, hey, they kind of have my job, like what's going on over there, go talk to them. You probably have a lot in common as humans. You have similar jobs. Just because your organization and your org structure has sort of set you up in different ways doesn't mean you should be pitted against each other. You can probably learn from each other. So set something up where you get to know each other and share learnings within your organizations instead of seeing it as someone to be threatened by. Ask for feedback. These next 2 are related. Ask for feedback on yourself and your team. Either there's specific times of the year where this happens, or do it proactively, but ask team members what it's like to work with you and your team, partners specifically. I would also encourage everyone to survey your own teams. I think that we get a little bit in the, we sometimes feel like we know our team so well, like, oh, it's going well, this is going great. Still take the time to send a survey, do skip levels, talk in your one-on-ones, whatever format works best for your organization, get feedback. Don't assume you know how people feel, and try and get feedback at least once a year. And I do find that, you know, everybody gives feedback in different ways. The survey, an actual Google form, goes a long way for a lot of people who don't necessarily want to talk in a one-on-one, aren't going to respond to just an email, whatever it is. So seek out feedback. It helps, and be open to what you're going to hear. So as far as what this means for this week, if this is one of your 3, just start putting a survey together, set up some skip levels. If you tend to be the first person to talk in the meeting, or you talk the most in a meeting, try leaving space. In the next meeting that you're in, just try not being the first person to talk. This is another thing that I've had to work on over the years, because silence makes me uncomfortable. I get nervous. I'm like, I feel bad for like whoever's running the meeting. I want to like speak up. That isn't always the best for collaboration, because not everybody is at the same pace, and not everybody is going to jump in at the same pace. So if you've noticed, probably the same people jump in first, the same people talk a lot. If you're that person, just practice in a meeting this week, not being that person, and see what other ideas and what other people kind of bubble up. This next one, I want to do a whole entire presentation on someday, but I just reflect on your relationship with punctuality. So I am the type of person who prides myself on always being on time, always responding to things really fast. And in our sort of like Protestant work ethic corporate world, I'm like, yeah, that means I'm good. deep down inside, sometimes that means I'm suffering. Sometimes that means I have like crazy anxiety because an email hits and I can't chill out for a second and let it go without responding to it immediately. And it's like, what am I doing? Like, I am not serving anything in this situation, including myself, by being like frantically punctual. That's not great. It may show up okay, but it's not great for me. So I try and check myself there. Opposite end of the spectrum, people who are always late to everything, people who don't respond to things on time, always late to meetings. That's just rude in the world that we're in. You're sending, if that's you, like you're sending a message to your teams and the people you're working with that they're not a priority, even if the problem might actually be time management or you're too busy or whatever it is, you're actually sending a different message to everybody else, which is, I'm not important. This isn't important. This person has other things going on. So just find where you are on that spectrum and think about it a little bit. Address an issue directly. If something comes up and you get that feeling in your stomach that you're like, that sucked, I didn't like that. After some initial aftershocks, which shout out to a previous colleague of mine, Brian Lindsay, for sending an article around once that was like, we all like to address things right away. We're taught to do that if we can. But sometimes you want to wait till after the aftershocks and after things have calmed down a little bit, depending on what the issue is. But I really encourage you to truly like reach out to someone, have that conversation, talk about what it was as opposed to letting it fester, which leads into the next one, which is trying to let go of a grudge and or something you can't control. This is a big one. You might not check it off this week, but I can, speaking from my own experience, I know that in previous jobs, I've personally had a lot of frustration around like celebrities always changing their mind about stuff and being late. Turns out that is a worthless thing to get stressed about, because artists and the whole celebrity talent culture, that's not going to change. Like, that is not something that is worth my stress. So I'm sure you all have that as well, that there's an old grudge or there's something that you're just like, let it go. Like there's so much to worry about in the world. Make that not be one of it, whatever that is for you. Own a mistake if you make one. Don't make one just to own it and check it off. But if you know you messed up and you own a mistake, just admit it. It goes so far, especially if you're in a position of leadership. It goes really far to be able to say like, oh, whoops, could have done that a little differently, sent that too soon. My bad, it slipped through the cracks. Sorry, whatever it is. Just own it. It goes a long way. It also feels good just to get through it, not feel like you're sort of living in this sort of harboring situation. Say no to something that you don't have time for. If someone comes to you and you really, truly don't have time, it's going to set you over the edge, say no, or say yes. And this is what I'm going to need. I'm going to need some money or some resources or to get this other thing off my plate, but just practice saying no to something you don't have time for. Again, this is all in the spirit of our broader collaborations and us all showing up in the best way possible to work together the best as we can. It's not being selfish. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing it for your team. And by knowing your boundaries of what you can take on. Send a shout out. Something went well, something went great, send a shout out and name the entire team. I know sometimes we're like, there's too many people, I don't want to forget someone by accident, and that's fine. Don't like every single time something great happens, it'd be overkill, but it really is nice every so often, even if it's a ton of people that are listed, for someone to see their name in a shout out, especially if it's someone who doesn't always get the shout out because they're not the creative director or the, marketing partner or whatever it is. It's like, it goes a long way. It feels really good. It makes people feel seen. So maybe you have an opportunity to do that. Go outside without your phone. That's fun. It's weird. It's like, what do you do with your hands? Oh my God. It might mean you're actually not listening to something. It might mean you're just like really sort of don't have anything going on. I like it. I recommend giving it a try. Maybe it'll work for you. Maybe it won't. Eat away from your desk. Plan some time off. That's great. Time off is there for a reason. We recharge. Again, back to our connect, reflect, recharge. Check in with yourself. Do you still believe in your product and your company? I'm not saying everything and every job needs to be like this mission-based, you feel like you're changing the world. If you do, and that's what you're driven towards, that's amazing. Do that. Make sure that you really are aligned with the mission. For some of other people, it's just like, you believe that the company is doing well. You believe in your leadership. You believe that the product is working, whatever it might be. As soon as you start feeling bad about your work culture or your work product or company, that's going to start coming out in your work. And I know sometimes we want to tell ourselves like, oh, it's just work. I can just phone it in. It's just a job. I have my hobbies. I have this, I have that. But just know that if you can keep it neutral or positive with your relationship with your job, that's great. Keep going. If you feel it's tipping into negative, most likely that's going to start impacting your collaborations. It's going to impact how you show up. It's going to impact how you work with other people. So just a quick little check-in. And then don't wait for the perfect reorg. So if you've worked at places that I've, like how I've worked at, there's reorgs all the time. Reorgs can improve things for sure. There are better and worse org structures out there in the world, but it's highly unlikely that there's one that's going to fix everything. So this is where I'm just going to leave us with a half-baked cul-de-sac org chart analogy here, because to go back to sort of the buildings and the people. Okay, let's think about the neighborhood that we live in. Most of us probably work in organizations that look a little bit like that org structure that you're looking at. There's kind of, in a way, and again, this was another middle of the night, like send help, what is wrong with my brain? But I woke up and I was like, it's kind of like a cul-de-sac where you know your little area, but if you live in sort of a cul-de-sac neighborhood, yes, it's quiet and maybe you know sort of the people right around you, but it's not necessarily a city planning model for cross collaboration. Going around town, getting to know each other, getting all around and being able to sort of like walk through places and see. And I think there's some org charts that are more of a matrix model, which might be a little bit more of that sort of cityscape grid of sorts. But in some ways, I think, waiting for the perfect reorg to solve your team problems, your collaboration problems. Again, I'm not saying don't reorg if you need it. I'm just saying it's highly unlikely that that's going to be the thing that fixes everything all the time. So that is the end. I think, Kevin, you're probably monitoring the chats.
I am. What a great presentation, Kate. So many good nuggets in there that are not just, for professional, but personal as well. You can take back to your family.